Welcome to this wonderful Monday, everyone. Another episode of Your Technologically Inept Foods Teacher to teach you about apple crisp. The crisp of the kings. Now keep in mind this recipe, we happen to be working with apples today, but you can make a crisp with anything, any type, well, not anything, I might not make like meat crisp. But you can make like strawberry rhubarb crisp, you can combine other fruits with apples, there's many things that you could do. So it doesn't have to always be an apple crisp. Now, I happen to be using the apple crisp recipe here. I've Miss Estrada and myself have worked really hard to pre-measure your spices in here, except for the brown sugar and the cinnamon, which you have in your individual pantries. So the cardamom, nutmeg, and the oats are in this little section here, and then each of you get your own little miniature individual section of butter, as we cannot be touching each other's food items. So those of you who are not engaged in my lesson and are right now on your technological devices, please refrain and take 2 deep breaths, and then just let yourself put that technology away to be fully engaged with your loving teacher, okay? So you guys get 1 apple per person. You have this, and basically we're gonna make like a little mini baby apple crisp in this dish so that you have the joy of eating this. If I was gonna do this at home, a full-size apple crisp, like I do a 9 by 13, a full-size apple crisp could take anywhere from 12 to 20 apples sliced, so pared, cored, and sliced in a dish. And you always wanna have your dish heaping full. So, because apples shrink when they cook. Now, I want to first talk to you about my apple crisp ratio. This happens to be a small recipe that I use in my classroom, but in my home, I use this ratio to help me with any crisp I want to do. So if you want to vary the filling, that's totally fine. I have other suggestions if you choose to do that. Okay, so my ratio, I use what you call a 1 to 1 to 1 to 1 ratio. Okay, for my apple crisp. This is Mrs. K's apple crisp ratio, which our recipe today does not follow. But if you remember this ratio, you don't need a recipe to make your crisp. You need a pastry blender, your heart, this ratio, and these ingredients. So 1 part flour to 1 part butter or margarine to 1 part brown sugar to 1 part oats. Now, if you want to add seasonings like cinnamon, cardamom, cloves, or even like pumpkin pie spice, you can. You can add any spices you want, or you can leave them out however you want. Some people also like to add a little vanilla. Totally up to you, depending on what your taste palette enjoys. So I use a 1 to 1 ratio. So if I'm making like a little one, then you just use half a cup of each of those things. If I'm making a huge one for a family dinner, which we should not do during COVID, we might use 3 cups for each of those things. Do you know what I mean? Depending on the size of the dish. Now keep in mind, when you pack a big dish for a crisp, say this is my dish, your apples should really be heaping full like this. Because in the cooking process, the apples are really going to shrink down because they have a high moisture content, as we've learned, and then the crisp will sit right here. So this is our crispy layer, and they'll fit nicely inside that dish, okay? If you're choosing not to use apples, but you're going to use a high moisture fruit, like for example, blueberries, high moisture, peaches, strawberries, high moisture, I would toss your strawberries, like higher moisture fruits, with sugar and cornstarch. Do you know why I would do that? Anybody want to wager a guess? Talk to me, dude. You're the one. You're the one.
To dry them out?
To dry them out. No. Basically, I'm tossing them with sugar and cornstarch so that because when in the cooking process, they will release more water, that those waters will actually become a sauce. Because you've added cornstarch in there, so you're making it more like a fruit syrup as opposed to a bunch of fruit sitting in water. Does that make sense? So if you're varying your fruits beyond the apple into more watery fruits, I might use that to help quell a whole bunch of water from sitting at the bottom of your dish. So that's what I might do. But today, the challenge to you all will be paring an apple using a knife. How many of you know how to do this? Okay, so paring an apple using a knife. So you put your knife in the dominant hand, you have your apple in your other hand. This knife is held like this, and this hand simply moves the apple in the direction, right? All right, so I use my thumb. You see how I'm pressing my thumb on the top of the apple to guide where I want the knife to go. My other hand simply helps me to twist the apple around. Great, so I'm using my thumb, my other hand, and then you want to get as much of the peel off as you can without cutting away too much of the flesh, because that's the good part that we actually want to eat. Now, I want to teach you guys how to pare. So paring is removing the skin from any fruit or vegetable. I find using a knife faster once you get really good than a vegetable peeler. And like potatoes too, I use a knife, not a vegetable peeler, until you get really good at it. So again, I'm using a Henkel one man. So remember, with Henkel knives, they have a little man with a stick standing like this. The more men, the better the knife. Okay, so I've got my apple skins off. This is where all your nutritional value is, FYI. So when you eat your apple or most fruits and vegetables, the nutritional value for you is either in the skin or just a few millimeters below the skin. This is chaos now. Looking for a cutting board. No, I can, don't worry, Bernadette, you do your thing. There's no emergency, my hair is not on fire. Okay. I will come into this kitchen and retrieve a... Don't worry, your hands smell like garlic, but nobody in the video knows that. Nobody wants a garlic flavored apple crisp. So, couple things. So first of all, I've got my apple. All right, if you see any bruise spots or spots that you don't really like, just trim them off. Use your knife, trim them off. Nah, I don't want that in my crisp. Personally, I like to use a tart apple. So first I'm gonna quarter half my apple. From here I'm gonna put them on the flat side and I'm gonna quarter them. So you should have quarters. Okay, the next thing I'm gonna do, so I'm gonna show you one way. You have an apple, you have a paring knife. You're gonna hold your apple, you're gonna slide your knife halfway down 1/4 section. You're gonna turn the apple around. You're gonna slide your knife down the other section and pop it out. Oh, voila! I have a beautiful quarter of an apple, and then I wanna do nice thin slices. So I'm switching over to my chef's knife. I'm watching my fingers, making sure I don't chop any of them off and leaving with the same amount of appendages as I came with. All right, so the second way, so when I do 20 apples, I mean, that's a lot of cutting. What I do is I put my apple on its side and I go just above where the core is and I cut, making sure my hand is up on an angle just to pop out the core, which is fast too. And I do nice thin slices. I mean, some people like to do cubes. I do slices. So those are a couple different ways. Then you can do whatever you want. You can toss your apples in a little cinnamon and sugar as well. Some people like to do that. Because I'm putting so much sugar and cinnamon in the topping, I usually keep my apples true to taste. So I like a Granny Smith. I love me a Spartan because they're like sweet tart, a little bit tart, a little bit sweet. And I like Max for apple crisp. I don't like apples that are super mealy. You can also do it in your hand. So you can slice in your hand like this, however you want. You can go like this. If this takes longer, I might slice like this. Okay, so I've got my apples in my dish. Okay, and then the next piece of this, my dear, would you just tell me where I'm at in terms of time? Because I can't, because YouTube doesn't want me to go over.
9 minutes.
9 minutes, sweet. I only have a few minutes left. You guys only have a few minutes left to listen to my voice. Yeah, will you preheat an oven for me? You are the best. Then I get a bowl, and I quite simply put my oats in. So I've got oats, nutmeg, cardamom in here. In your mini pantries, so in between people. So guys, one person goes, Miss Estrada or myself come through, we help you with the sanitizing of all the mini pantry items, then the other person starts. And then you guys clean dishes and sanitize kitchen for each other, and we're gonna come and check. Let me just see my flour. is 50 mils of flour. So how am I gonna measure that? Well, it's a very weird measurement, so I'm gonna use 3 tablespoons of flour. 1, 2, 3. I feel like, you know, Count Dracula from Sesame Street. How many scoops of flour? 3 scoops of flour. And a 5 milliliter, because that's how you get 50. So I got 15 plus 15 plus 15 is 45, plus another 5 is 50, which is an extremely weird measurement, but that's what you get when you're making a tiny miniature handful of apple crisp. So I'm gonna pop my butter in there. And then I've got the cinnamon. Cinnamon is like my favorite. I love it. It tells you to put in 1 mil of cinnamon. Miss Kay is gonna put a heaping mil because she loves the cinnamon. Have a good day, Miss Cochet. We share our love of the Nespresso. Okay, and then you can use a pastry blender to blend this together. I have a shortage of pastry blenders. It's something that I actually need to purchase more of among, you know, oh, do you think they have those at Wholesale Club?
Yeah.
They do? Okay, I have to go there for those bottles, pastry blenders, sifters. You know, that's what a Friday night looks like from a foods teacher. A night at the Wholesale Club, you know, getting like 50 pounds of flour, a bunch of little cups to put my ingredients in, sanitizer, you know, and you just kind of cut it together. You want it to look like coarse crumbs, but the thing is there's a lot more butter in here, so you're gonna be helping it out. I'm using my finger because I know it's clean, and I know that I'm the only one touching these tools, and I'm the only one who would be consuming this food. You want it to be moistened. Honestly, in my house, I do this with my hands. Don't judge me. Everything's okay at home. But here in the foods room, for sanitation purposes, COVID-19 purposes, and just so many purposes at this moment, we want to make sure that everybody's safe and doing what we need to keep us all healthy and safe and at work and school, because we don't want to go on isolation ever again. Okay. You guys must be like, wow, she talks to herself a lot. Yeah. Okay, so I've got heaping custard cup. I've got beautiful crisp that I'm just pushing on top here. Oh yes, looks wonderful. I'm making a mess. That's okay. All wonderful things that come out of a kitchen start in a mess and end in a masterpiece. You can put nuts, walnuts, whatever kind of nuts you like. I don't like nuts in my apple crisp personally. Make sure your apples are covered. It's nice and heaping full. Then you put this into the oven. What are we checking for in terms of doneness? We use the fork and we gently push the fork through. If the fork goes through the apples without a bunch of pushing and crunching, then they're done. Okay, there shouldn't be a lot of effort behind that.
Is that the apple crisp?
The crisp?
Is that what it is?
Yeah, each person gets one. They make an individual one just for themselves. We're making it miniature. You can make a giant one at home using Mrs. K's amazing ratio for Thanksgiving dinner. Should you be sick of pumpkin pie or be like me, the person who hates pumpkin pie in the world, this is what I would make. But up to you. So until next time, when the kids show up on time for school, I bid you adieu.